Hi, I'm Kate from dailytarotgirl.com, and today I am speaking with Avalon Cameron. Avalon is a hereditary witch. She is an initiated spirit worker. She has been reading tarot for over 20 years, and she has lots of experiences running circles and covens. And she is also the creator of the Bonestone and Earthflesh Tarot, and she is a tarot summer school teacher this year along with me. So I am so excited to be talking to Avalon. Welcome, Avalon.
Thank you, Kate. I'm so happy to be here. Thank you for the lovely introduction.
So I want to hear a little bit more about what it's like being a hereditary witch, because I'm assuming that that means that your mother and maybe your grandmother were also witchy and into this kind of spiritual stuff. And I just think that's so different than anyone else I know, because everyone I know, including myself, has kind of come to this stuff kind of on their own, and a lot of people's families are maybe like not supportive of this kind of path, or just don't have any real experience or knowledge or understanding of it. And so I know a lot about, like, I've heard from a lot of people like what that's like, but I don't know anyone who comes from a family where this is like, actually no, so I was talking to someone the other day. Was it Melissa Sinova? I can't remember, but someone was telling me that they come from like a really psychic family, but most people don't. So I want you to kind of talk a little bit about what that's been like for you.
Okay, well, that's a really fun question for me actually, because it's something that I have personally been pondering as well. And it's only really been since I have started sort of sharing aspects of my journey online that I've had to sort of cross compare and see, wow, I'm coming at this from such a different place. There's not too many like me out here in specifically in my area. But I think the crux of that is the fact that I'm Brazilian born. So I come from Brazil, and where I come from, that's very normal. It's normal to have hereditary practitioners, to have, spiritist centers that belonged to grandmothers and great grandmothers. The spiritist center, the Terreiro that I come from, I was raised in that faith from a really, really young age. I'm talking about like from the moment I was born, I had my little beads hung around my neck. And, I was raised in a very specific way, but I was also one of so many kids that were raised in that same sort of, that same sort of faith, that same sort of religion. And I think growing up, it was really commonplace. I can't actually sort of like even comment too much on that, in the sense that, it's like an upbringing, like it's what you know. So when you grew up, your life, your childhood was normal to you. My childhood was also really normal to me, except now looking back, it's more a case of everything had a spirit attached to it, from cutting my birthday cake, for instance, making my wish in a traditional manner. And then the first piece of cake goes to the spirits of the Ere, which is São Cosme da Minha Mãe do And so, things like that, going down to do a little road opening, at a young age, just to clear the pathways whenever I was starting a new year at school. It's, having these little figures, these little, wooden charms pinned to the inside of my singlets and clothing anytime that I was to leave the house. It's, living in a house where there's so many altars, so many. I have a video on my YouTube channel with all the altars of my family home, and it's a lot of altars and shrines and very old school. And it's just, it's something that I miss now that I'm so far removed from it. But I think the fact that I was raised sort of in this tradition, in this family folk magical spiritist tradition, does give people the impression that I might have some kind of an inside expertise. And I'm not sure that that's correct per se. I know what I know, but what I know belongs to a tradition that's very closed, and it's very family oriented. And what people in the modern day witch and esoteric communities know are very book based. It's available to anyone who wants to read. And so it's not like I have any kind of extra upper hand being a hereditary. It's just that I know my tradition very, very well. And my tradition isn't necessarily something that is practiced outside of, my culture or even my neighborhood of people. So I don't know. Does that answer the question?
It does, yeah, it does. And what was the name of the folk magic that you were raised in?
Umbanda and Candomblé.
Okay. Okay. So I think it kind of does give you a leg up in a way, because you were saying like, um, this is something that's just normal to you, right from when you were a little baby. So I think in that sense that this is like a natural part of your life, tapping into spirit and connecting with that side of things. I think that's really amazing. And have you noticed, like, has your spiritual practice changed a lot over the last, few years? Or do you have like a really specific set kind of ritualistic way of connecting to spirit that you have just stuck with all this time, or has it changed a lot over time?
I think it's a bit of both, actually, Kate, because my tradition, my family's tradition, while it is influenced by Umbanda and Candomblé, it has a very strong folk magical practice attached to it. Like, I'm talking like, laying of hands and charmed healing. And when you have a bump on your head, you do certain little things like that. And there's a lot of that happens that I still like adhere to now, because it's like, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. I think it works, so I put it to good use. But with Umbanda and Candomblé, it is impossible to practice that faith, that religion on my own. Like Umbanda specifically and Candomblé specifically, you need, the version of a high priestess, a Babalorisha. You also need the organ, the people that sing the ancient hymns, the chants, and that know the specific drum beats to call the spirits into the place. Then you need the Akajis to service the mediums when they're in ritual possession mode, and then you need the mediums that are going to be ritually possessed. So it's an enormous amount of people required to do that. I'm one person living in Australia, so far away from my ancestral lands. So when I came to Australia and I was 15, I went through a bit of a lull, and I had one of those kind of spiritual crisis moments where I'm like, my ancestors aren't buried here. I don't have spirits. Where are my spirits? I don't have friendly spirits here. And then I didn't have any access at that time to anything that came close to what it is that we were doing in Brazil. And so I became that like seeker, just like I imagine, just like everyone else that's looking for that something extra. And I came across a magazine on a news agency shelf, and it was called Witchcraft Magazine. And I looked at the cover of it and I'm like, it looks a bit like my vibe. So I got it. And then I started to explore sort of more Western esotericism, Wicca, chaos magic, grimoire magic, high magic or ceremonial magic as it is known, and then other forms of divination. And it took me back to that place of magic. It was a neighboring place to the magic that I used to practice, not so far removed, but also very different. But the nature of magic and the nature of spirit is the same, no matter where you go and no matter what you do. It's the pathways that will lead you to connect with magic and connect with spirit that are different. And so that's something that took me a long time to sort of understand, is that despite the fact that I was going via a totally different path, I was still getting to that same place in ways. And that was very helpful to me. And I still joke to this day that Wicca is like a gateway drug when it comes to modern witchcraft and magic. Many people start with Wicca, and I started my, exploration of magic outside of my family circle with Wicca. So I give a nice little nod to Wicca, and I have nothing against the practice. So yeah.
That's really interesting what you say about how you realize that there's so many, not that Wicca was necessarily similar to what you're practicing, but that you realize that it was, in a lot of ways, the kind of the same energy and the same kind of connection to that realm. And I was talking to Mitchell Osborne the other day, and he was saying that he was raised, I think it was in the Catholic Church, and when he started getting into mediumship and all that, and he would experience like voices and things like that, and he was like, oh, it's like the same voice that I would hear when I was, into the Catholic stuff, it's like the same energy or whatever, but different, different medium or whatever.
Yeah, that's it. And yeah, I think that's the beautiful thing about spirituality in general, is that you really go where you're called, where you resonate. And if you truly resonate with the path that you're on, no matter what path that may be, you eventually get to that core of what spirituality is. And that core is also different to everyone. So if you're aiming to work with spirits, that will be your core. If you're aiming to be a better manifester and a spellcaster and a magician, then that will be your core. Or if it's healing, or if it's something totally different. So I think that, whatever gets you there, go with it.
Yeah. And so what areas do you find yourself drawn to?
Well, I'm naturally a spiritist, because that's the culture that I come from. That's the tradition that I come from. So for me, spirits are easy to work with. And in my culture, we have this thing called a monji jogu, and it means a game hand. And it's a sort of like a terminology that's used for people who can pick up divination. And so I find myself just having a natural aptitude for divination. Not that I know every manner of divination, but if I'm taught it, I can do it. If I teach myself it, I can do it. It's a language that it makes sense to me in my mind. Whereas something more complex is just outside of my sphere of comfort. And I'm just like, no, my brain doesn't go in that direction. So that for me is definitely, it's something that I enjoy as well. I love researching the methods of divination. I like anything to do with signs and symbolism and things of that nature.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm always learning something.
I can relate to that too. I love the signs and the symbols, and anything that has kind of an element of like mystery or kind of secretiveness. I'm quite drawn to.
Yes, I know just what you mean.
So do you have any like daily or weekly practices that help you stay like grounded and kind of connected to spirit?
Mm-hmm. Yes, I do. This is involved. This is really involved. So my home and hearth magic is really strong because it's something that I do cyclically. And that is something that I need to do in order for me to feel any kind of peace within my home. Aside from that, my daily practice happens a little bit in the morning, and it happens a little bit at night. So my daily practice, depending on what it is that I'm personally working on. So if I'm working on healing, or if I'm working on manifesting, or if I'm working on just, grounding and centering, those practices look a little bit different, but it usually takes me to my altar. I usually light a candle. If I'm not in the mood to light a candle, then I'll spray myself with a nice hydrosol. I'll sit there for a minute, hold my stones, whichever one I feel called to working with, and just have that moment connecting with my breath and connecting with my body and connecting with the earth. And then I set my intention for the day. I like to work with affirmations as well. Then I go and I put a little, magical juju in my tea or my coffee. And I sit down and I speak to my kids, because I'm a mother of 3, and I speak to my kids about their intentions for the day. That's a big thing in our house, is to like really fortify the mind. And, if they're off to a bad start, this is particularly good for them to reinforce a really good positive intent. And then in the evening, I tend to work with either tarot or Lenormand, and I sit down and I do lots of journaling, and I'm into my art journaling. And it's a really good way for me to sort of rest my mind and just relax at the end of the day. So these are, important moments. And that's my little ritual at the end of the day as well. Putting on an audio book, a really good one, and then just journaling and pulling some cards, and then, pulling the magic out of that. And it feels so good. It's such a comforting, simple practice that anybody can do. And yet it feels so, so good to me. So there's some of the ways.
That sounds beautiful. And I want to ask you a little bit more about art journaling. But recently, my evening ritual has been reading like doom and gloom news articles on Reddit and watching really bad reality TV. Like, like like Love Island and Too Hot to Handle and like really
I love it. I love it. I love it. No judgment whatsoever. Hey, whatever floats your boat.
Yeah, it doesn't, I don't know if it floats my boat. It's just that sometimes at the end of the day, I just feel like I don't have any energy for doing anything like creative. And so I do that, which is actually really like soul sucking in a lot of ways.
Oh,
So,
I know.
and sometimes I won't do that, and I'll do something like you were talking about art journaling. I'm kind of starting an art journal. I'll do something like that, or I'll do some watercolors, or I'll listen to a podcast while I do some drawing or something, and it's just so much better than watching like shitty reality TV and reading depressing articles on the internet. So tell me about your art journal. What is that like?
Okay, so it starts off in my little Hobonichi Tesho. So for those of you who are planner lovers, you'll just be like, I know that. It's a cult planner.
I don't know it.
You don't know it? That's fine. There'll be people out there that are like, oh my God, that's my soul. That's my soul on paper. But for me, my journaling practice transforms depending on what I need. Right now, I'm doing 8 critical tasks and a focus word. So hang on, I will grab my journal.
Okay, yeah. Okay.
And then I can show you exactly sort of what it looks like in the flesh. So I'll pull a page here. And so this is kind of what it looks like at the moment.
Oh, beautiful.
And so it looks fancier than it is, but down the bottom here, I choose a focus word. So for here, what have we got? We've got gratitude, and then we've got feel. So when I write things like that, it's because I want to feel myself. I've been too much in my head, and I really want to feel my body. I want to like feel the breath. I want to feel the soil. Like it's about having a more tactile day. And then I create like 8 little boxes, and then I write on or next to those boxes 8 tasks that I want to complete in that day that will propel me forward in some way. So perhaps it's that little job that I have been sort of putting off for a really long time. I'll put that there, and anything else. And I always make sure to put things like art journal, read, and meditate every single day. So even if it's just like 1 minute breath meditation or a 5-minute breath meditation, and even if it's just preparing my page for the next day as far as art journaling, and then I audiobook or I sit down and I read. So I make sure that I'm doing those self-care things for myself so that I'm more rested at the end of the day. But then I find myself completing a lot more, because there's that satisfaction of ticking something off your list, as though like something happens, like it's an endorphin rush when you just go, yep, I did it. And so that's the vibe that I'm in with my art journaling at the moment.
I like it. It's kind of like a to-do list and some art and creativity there as well.
Yeah. And I make space because I'm learning Lenormand at the moment, I make space to, just journal about what I've learned about a new card on that day, or, to keep track of something else, or, I just make space, and it changes from day to day depending on what I need and what I wish to focus on. So I keep it. So really
you're just starting to learn Lenormand, did you say, or you've been doing?
Yeah, I'm just starting. It's been years that I've been starting. I've owned Lenormand decks for like 8 years. And for 8 years, I've been shuffling a Lenormand deck and looking up the meanings online. So now I've decided to just be a little bit more, focused with that. And, I've had Rana George's beautiful book, The Essential Lenormand, since she released it. And I've had it on Kindle, but then I went to in the last couple of months, I got it in hard copy so that I could sit there and highlight and tab it and do all that kind of good fun stuff. And it's helpful. It's much more helpful. And because I need to have things on repeat for it to really sink into my brain, having those resources there at the ready, very helpful.
Nice. I have one Lenormand deck. It's called the Green Glyphs Lenormand. And actually it's right. I happen to have it handy. It's by James Eads.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, he's done quite a few different tarot and oracle decks. And anyways, it's a really cute little deck. And I got it a few years ago and I thought, I'm gonna finally learn Lenormand. And I haven't yet. It's like you said, you took you years to you've been a beginner for years. I haven't yet learned it, but it is something I would eventually like to learn just because it's a different system and it looks like it's much more simple than tarot.
It is. It
Mhm.
is. I find that to be true, but I also find that if you're very tarot, as I'm sure you are,
Hmm.
it's hard to look at cards that you also see in the tarot and not start to tarify them.
Yeah, right.
So yes, it's breaking habits that I found to be the most difficult. And and once you sort of get over that little hurdle, it's like read the card. And I was like, okay, but I haven't yet made sense of that. What does read the
Yeah,
card mean?
right, right. So I was reading on your website that you recently broke your ankle and then you got into a car accident after that.
Yes.
So you've been taking kind of a break from doing readings
Yeah.
to heal up. So what has that been like for you? Because I find like for myself, often when I've had some kind of health crisis or injury where I've had to kind of take a step back, it usually always happens when I'm like really, really busy and when I like really can't take a break. And then it happens and it kind of forces you to take a break. And it's kind of an opportunity, I think, to focus on different things. So I'm just curious, like what has that been like for you?
Holy moly. Like, first of all, well, as you know, I broke my ankle just a day before my birthday. And then
Oh,
I got into a car accident several weeks after that with my kids in the car coming back from school. And then following that, I had walking pneumonia. So it was three things. And now I'm a superstitious person. We
hmm.
witches tend to be. Third time's the charm. Third time, it's like, oh, what the bloody hell am I doing?
Hmm.
And I realized that I needed a break. So in my head, that's a logical conclusion. Like, the universe, my gods, my guides, my guardians are telling me, take a break. Except I didn't know how to take a break. And I don't think I've ever known how to take a break. So it took breaking my ankle for me not to be able to even walk up my property to my office. Like, I was physically incapable of doing that. And so I'm like, well, what am I going to do? So then I set up a little altar down here so that I could do a lot of filming and, a space for me to do other things. And when I did that and I was up on my foot with my moon boot on,
Hmm.
I had my car accident. So then I was all like sort of like I wasn't seriously injured in any way, but I had wicked whiplash and I was sore, like just the
Hmm.
shock of the accident. So I couldn't even stand up. So I ended up just sitting in my rocking chair and reading. And after I read for a couple of days, I started to feel myself unwind.
Yeah.
I've never had that feeling before, like not since before I had children. Just that feeling of, wow, like it's almost like weight was lifted off my shoulders and an aura of pressure around me. And I was like, what is happening to me? And in my in the back of my mind, I'm like, this is what happens when you become lazy. This is what lazy feels like. Judge. And it really took friends and family to come in going, just settle down. Like, for fuck's sake, sit down and do nothing. And as it turns out, sitting down and doing nothing is extraordinarily difficult. And so I had to make my peace with that. And I did a little shadow work as well, because, like I was saying, if I'm sitting down and I'm not accomplishing anything, suddenly I'm lazy. It can't just be because I need a rest. It can't just be because I need to heal. It can't just be because I need to ground and center, or I need time to myself, or I'm being kind to myself in some way. It couldn't just possibly be that. It had to be, I'm being lazy. So
Right.
that all of that self-judgment, like things just came up for me during that time, as is like, that too, when you're sick or you're injured, you're forced to reflect.
Hmm.
There comes that moment and you're like, this is what's happening to me. And, processing all of that was really satisfying. And I realized that the world doesn't come crashing down around you. I realized that customers and clients who were waiting for readings were extraordinarily understanding of the situation. And I'm like like tying myself in knots about it, going, oh my God, I'm going to be late on my readings and people are going to be upset with me. No, that's not what happens, because people are actually genuinely nice people and good human beings, and they don't treat you with any disdain if you're late on something like that. So I learned so much in that time.
How long ago was that happened when you finally started to unwind?
Well, I broke my ankle on the 7th of May. I remember this because my birthday's on the 8th of May. So how's that for a bit of luck? And by the time I'd had my car accident and I ended up, in the back of an ambulance and, at the hospital, so they were checking me for spinal injuries, and I'm laying there and I'm like, I was in crisis mode because I couldn't move my head.
Mm-hmm.
And then I came back and all I could do was just sit and rest. And it took about 9 days, like 9 days after that. That's my magic number for getting things. So it took about 9 days. And by the 7th day, I started to notice that something was shifting.
Yeah.
And I wasn't
this in
able
July or in May?
This was in July. By that stage, we were in July. And we were in mid-July, and suddenly I'm just like, wow, like I felt so different. I felt so different. And then when I finally got to the point where I was healing, sorry.
I just want to say, like, I noticed a difference in you as soon as we connected on Zoom. And I think the last time I saw you was at one of the Tarot Summer School Q&A campfires or whatever.
Yeah.
And that was quite a while ago, I think.
Yeah.
That might have been in June. I'm not sure. I don't know if you're at the one in July or not. But I've noticed, like, you seem very different. Like, you seem so much more relaxed and chilled out. Whereas before, like, don't be offended by this, but you seemed very, like, not uptight, but just like very serious. Like,
it's very serious.
Like, I was like, oh, this chick's like really like type A, like. And now everything that you've just told me confirmed my suspicion that you were kind of type A. Because that, like, sitting and doing nothing, for me, comes naturally. I find that very easy to do, but I know so many people, most of my friends say, like, oh God, I can't just sit and do nothing. Like, I have to be doing something, or I feel this sense of guilt and failure that I'm not being productive and I'm not being useful and all that. And so, but I can tell, like, you just seem so much more like chilled out and just relaxed, like just your face, your energy, like you just seem like you're a different person.
I feel like a different person. It's funny how it happens, right? I'm typically a pretty laid back, relaxed sort of an individual. I have a relatively big personality with close friends and family, and I'm always on the go creating something, but I'm pretty mellow. And you don't actually notice how wound up you can become after time, especially if you don't give yourself enough, like, adequate rest. And that's a story. And just learn how to feasibly ground, center, and relax. It's more than grounding and centering. It's actually learning how to relax. And what I came to understand was, and I was writing about this morning on Instagram, is that for me, rest equated more sleep. But that's not really how you rest. Yeah, you need an adequate amount of sleep, but you also need to include restful activities, restful periods of time throughout your day in order for you to manage your stress levels and, and just unwind a little bit so that you're not all tense as you carry through the day. And that's how my late night, well, not my late night, but my evening journaling sessions ended up. I just wanted to give myself 8 critical tasks to accomplish. So no matter what happened outside of that, if I could tick those 8 things off my list, I would feel productive for the day and as though that I accomplished something. And then I got to draw and doodle and play and listen to an audiobook. And doing that over and over again for a period of about 6 weeks enabled me to understand that rest and rest are 2 very different things. Like, sleeping rest and wakeful rest are 2 necessary and very different things.
Yeah. And I found, like, that's the one thing that has helped me with my doing readings, like tarot readings, is I have to be relaxed in order to like tap into my intuition and to notice certain things in the cards and to like relay those messages in a helpful way. I need to be like really truly relaxed in
Yeah.
order to do that. And so that's like the piece of advice I give people. I'm like, this is the number one most important thing, is being able to just like relax, because that kind of brings you into like a different state of being. You're more receptive, you're more observant, you're not in fight or flight mode, you know, you're not all up in your head, you're like actually like in your body.
Yeah, it's a really, really good tip to give people, is just to relax. And, you know, when it comes to, you know, folks who are new to the tarot can be very scary. And so the heart elevates and it starts to race, and it's all like very like adrenaline. And it's really getting over that initial rush of the cards and understanding that they're not going to bite you. They're not going to give you some kind of a weird doomsday prophecy. They're pictures that need to be read in a specific way. And so yeah, I get it.
And I think too with tarot, like sometimes we can have like expectations, right? Like, and like you said,
Yes.
a fear like that you might get a card that's scary, or, you know, a fear that you're going to see something you don't want to see. And then having expectations about what cards you want, and all of that, I think, creates anxiety. So yeah, it's like definitely important to be able to just chill out when you're doing a reading.
I know. Have you ever noticed that when you start to worry if like the Tower or the Devil or the Three of Swords is going to jump out, you're almost calling that card to you in that moment too. I can't tell you how many times I've been shuffling going, not the Tower today, not the Tower today. And then I'm like, oh, the Tower today.
I feel like it's maybe because you like have it in your mind, you're holding it in your mind, plus you're adding the emotion, right? Of like, even though it's like a negative emotion, like a worry emotion, it kind of like calls it forward to you.
Yeah, you attract it, like you attract it or some parallel meaning in another card. So I've always found that really odd. So clearing the mind and just letting yourself be really relaxed and not putting any expectations on the cards is the best way to get like a really nice, mellow, clear, concise reading, for me personally, at least.
Yeah, I always kind of compare it to like having a conversation with someone. Like if you're having a conversation with someone and you're relaxed, you're going to be like the best version of yourself, right? And I think when you sit down to do a reading, it's kind of like you're having a conversation with your cards. And to have a good conversation, you need to be chilled out, I think.
Yeah, you need to have a nice glass of wine, a candle going, essential, like it's a process.
So tell me about your tarot summer school course.
All right. Well, in the past, this is not my first tarot summer school, but in the past, I've really sort of stuck with more witchy kinds of like, you know, little classes and that. But this time, after getting a lot of feedback as well from, you know, from my own patrons, from subscribers, and just people that follow my work, they were sort of asking for something that was just basic, like as basic as could possibly be without being generic. And so that's where the idea for Amp Up Your Tarot Practice came. It's the basics, but done in a very specific way. So I open up the conversation around some of those basics, you know, the basics of art journaling, for instance, or tarot journaling in this case, or the basics of, you know, dealing with difficult cards, or the basics of spreads versus freeform reading, and just giving people that sort of like that new look, like a different perspective in which to approach those same tried and true tasks, but from various different angles and with lots of options built into that as well. So I find that the basics are really crucial to get right. And I like to gloss over the basics, even now as a professional reader with, you know, I've been doing this for so many years. I still like to go back and gloss over those basics to make sure that my foundation is really solid, because tarot changes every year. Something new comes out, you know, for tarot, new books, new ideas, new court card meanings and approaches, and, you know, and then all of the modalities that plug in, like astrology and numerology and Kabbalah. So there's a lot, and it's always changing. It's organically growing, which is a beautiful thing. So fortifying the foundation is always very important to me. And I think that's a big chunk of what Amp Up Your Tarot practice is all about, is really, getting that foundational element, locked in, and, keyword play and all of that type of beautiful, fun stuff, so that you can get in there and start plugging new ideas into your practice, because that foundation is really solid. So that's where I was coming at it from.
Nice. Okay. So it sounds like it's like beginner friendly, but also like if you've been reading for a while, it will be fun to do too.
Exactly. That's kind of the point. I wanted it to be fun for people that had been playing around with cards for ages, but also really suitable to the absolute beginner, because it's all about it's about the approach. It's about looking at different approaches. And I don't really write in there which approach to favor. I'm just like, you have options, and everything has options, and you get to explore all these options. So it gives people a really nice, like, little in-way there.
Yeah, it's interesting that you said that about kind of revisiting the basics, even as like an experienced reader. I just started doing that last night. I was flipping through one of my tarot books to get some ideas for tarot exercises to do with someone. And I started with Mary Kay Greer's book, 21 Ways to Read a Tarot Card. And I just started reading like the first few pages, and the first few techniques are like super basic. And I just started kind of playing around with my cards and doing those basic techniques, and doing those like simple basic techniques, like it brought me back to when I was first learning tarot, but it also, like, doing it as someone who's more experienced, I had like a completely different experience doing it. I'm like, oh yeah, this is so important to do these like basic things, right?
Fun. Yeah, I agree. Like, I love going back there right now for my Patreon tarot tier. We're covering Around the Tarot in 78 Days, Marcus Katz and Tali Goodwin. And that book's been around for ages. And it's like a really good beginner book for, for budding tarot readers. But I have found myself just having such a good time reading it, because there's so many different approaches to tarot. Like every reader, every author or tarot master, for lack of a better word, is going to come at it from a different angle. Like Mary Kay Greer, Rachel Pollack, Kim Huggins, Marcus Katz, Tali Goodwin, like these sort of more notable names in the tarot sphere are always producing something of value. And it's always really, really worthwhile just like smoothing over those basics and reminding yourself a bit as well, because the longer you do tarot, the more you can fall into a rut. Like, this is my collection of keywords for this card, and that is it. It never changes. So the more you go back and revisit it, and you look at those keywords and you look at those approaches or the symbolism, etc., the more it can actually open up your own personal practice, I feel, at least. And that's always really humbling as well. Like, you never stop learning the basics. Like, you can always refine the basics. And it's a beautiful thought, really, when you think about it.
Yeah, and I know myself, I get stuck in a rut with reading. And so I find if I switch up what deck I use every few months or so, that kind of helps with that.
Yes, 100%. Yeah. This is why we collect.
Yes. Absolutely.
Oh, yes. How long do you typically work with the deck, like in one sitting, sort of in one cycle?
Well, I'll sometimes use like one deck for reading for other people, and then I'll use different decks when I want to read for myself. And I'll read with a different deck all the time when I'm reading for myself, but when I read for others, I like to have a consistent deck for a while. Just because it feels familiar and safe, I guess, comfortable.
Yeah.
And so let's see, for the last 6 months, I've been using this deck, the Lightseers Tarot.
Yep.
And before that, I used the Everyday Witch Tarot. And the Everyday Witch Tarot, I think I used for like almost 2 years.
Wow.
Yeah, so a while. And I'll probably use this one for at least a year and a half. And I think I might go back to the Everyday Witch. And then I might, because I noticed like after almost 2 years of reading with the Everyday Witch, I was starting to say the same kinds of things about the same cards. And I'm like, I feel like I'm just stuck in a rut. And then it's hard though to find a deck that you're like really comfortable on. Cause when I read for myself, I don't care if it like takes me a long time to really figure out a card. Like I'm fine with that. But when I'm reading for others, I don't want to be like, you know, like too much. I want like a kind of an easy deck to read with. So
yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah.
yeah,
And this is
yeah.
again why we collect, right?
What
And
about
you have
you? How long will you use a deck for?
well, I typically use one deck for about anywhere between 3 and 6 months, especially if it's like brand new. So if it's a deck that I've had in my collection for a long time that I gone back to time and time again, then I have I spend less time with those types of decks. But if it's a brand new deck and I really need to get to know it, then I'll spend a significant amount of time with that deck so that I can see how it performs across several different readings, several different clients, several different tasks, including my own personal readings. So yeah, but I'm a little bit in love with my own deck at the moment, so I'm working with it predominantly.
Your deck is beautiful. I don't have it, but I was
Thank you.
looking at images of it on your website, and it is gorgeous, gorgeous. Like, what was that process? And I know that you documented that whole process of creating your deck. Now that it's finished, is creating a deck something that you would do again? Why or why not?
Yes, it would be. I would definitely do another deck, but I would do it very differently a second time around. So I kind of pioneered something when I created the Bonestone, and that was like a live creative session between me and my artist Anaturian. And so we would actually conceive a card in front of a live YouTube audience, and people would, suggest things and input and all of that kind of stuff, which was such a unique experience and such an interesting, sort of way to progress with a deck. But it was also a very busy way. And tarot it requires a lot of patience and a lot of calm and a lot of, contemplation, I would say. And if I went to do it again, I probably wouldn't do it live, or I would, but in a different way. So rather than creating it online, I would then just show images and sketches and things like that of the progress moving through. But I found that, it creates a following. Like the deck created a bit of a following for itself, and and it was such a unique experience to live through. But I learned a lot with my very first deck, and so much happened throughout that process. I had to shift printers, and then so many things happen. I had typos in one of the cards after I just spent like $800 getting printer proofs, and then I ended up getting a divorce halfway through, which affected everything, and then COVID, and I was just like, this is fucking cursed. So I would definitely do things a lot faster now that I've done it once. I've got my favorite printer, I've got a good printer contact. Like I could seriously turn around a deck very quickly and have it mailed out, within 3 months of printing, which is ideally a good timeline. The timeline for the Bonestone was 4 years, and that's including the time it took, because this is I'll show some images. This is like a fine art deck. So these images were all created for the deck, and that requires a lot of time to sketch out a few different options, and then to perfect the color and to make sure that everything is as it should be. And there's quite a lot of work that needs to go on a single image in order for it to become a cohesive part of the deck. And so just bringing like 79 cards to life in that way, in a really solid, cohesive manner, takes time when it's that type of art. And Anna, chef's kiss good. She did an amazing job on it. And she was so diligent, and I appreciate all of her effort in that, because that's what made the deck so good.
Yeah. Yeah. I always wonder like what that's like to work with another person in, creating a deck.
You have to find the absolute right person. I still to this day maintain that Anna can read my mind.
Yeah.
Like she can absolutely read my mind. All I have to say was, how about we tilt it? And then she could just take that tiny little bit of a hint and go, we'll put it this way and we'll stream the hair out that way. And I'm like, that's exactly what I meant.
Oh, wow.
So we're good friends now to this day.
Yeah, that's amazing. So, what like made you want to create your own deck?
You'll appreciate this. Do you know, Kate, do you know this concept of my soul deck? Like I'm waiting to find my soul deck, my soulmate deck, the deck that's for me, the one, the great one, right? That was my motivating factor, because I loved many tarot decks. And I looked and I'm like, every tarot deck I had a criticism for. And I'm not talking about like a negative judgment or anything like that. Like, I would have done that differently, or I don't know why they chose to do that in that way. And when you're a collector, that is a process that you go through over and over again. You appreciate what's been created first and foremost. You seek to understand that option, that, that particular depiction. And then there's a little part of you inside that's like, if that was my deck, I wouldn't have done it that way, or I would have done it this way. And so, at that stage, I was like 1,100 decks in, and I was like, I reckon I can create my own. It was almost like an egotistical statement. I can do this.
Yeah, right.
I can put this together. As it turns out, yes, you can. Anybody can. But it's finding the right formula for that to happen. The Bonestone and Earthflesh, the name for my deck had been picked out probably about 5-6 years before I actually made the deck. I was studying my my bardic grade through the Order of Bards, Ovates and Druids, and I'm sitting there with some of my coven sisters, and I came across this little piece of writing, this little sentence that said something to do with Bonestone and Earthflesh. And I remember having like a visceral reaction to that. And I said, when I create a tarot deck, I'm going to call it the Bonestone and Earthflesh Tarot. Now, I had forgotten all about that, but my beautiful coven sister reminded me of that probably about a year ago. And it's like, it just freaks me out that all those years ago, like you had this moment where you're like, I'm going to do this and I'm going to call it that. And now you've actually done that and called it that. Like that was an incredible amount of follow through, which was a very validating piece of like feedback to receive, because I typically feel like I don't follow through with much of anything. As it turns out, I do. And I'm just highly critical of myself.
So as someone who does readings, and it sounds like you have a lot of experience like running groups and circles and covens and stuff like that. Yeah. What do you see as being your role on this earth right now?
Well, I've recently leaned into sort of like a bit of a label of an esoteric educator. I don't resonate with teacher. I don't resonate with high priestess. I'm not, these things don't feel right for me. But I like the idea that I could passively, in some small way, educate another person without making it some kind of ultra formalized and structured thing like, official teaching can be. And so I like the idea of being an esoteric educator, because that sort of covers most of what it is that I do, from tarot to witchcraft to folk magic to divination to spirit work, ancestral practices, whatever it may be. I've got my fingers in so many different pies in that way. Mm-hmm. So that to me has sort of settled for the time being, and whether or not I stick with that in future, who knows?
Right. And that you kind of came to that category like recently, or
very recently, actually, just about the time that I was having that nice little moment where I was like, wow, I feel like a different person now.
Yes.
It was during that kind of metamorphosis, I'll call it, that it sort of came to me. And it was a sort of like a bounce back from a few things that people were saying to me, like comments on my YouTube videos and people in my Patreon, or close friends like, you're a bit of a teacher. And I'm like, I don't like that. No offense to any teachers. I mean, if you feel the power to be a teacher, then go for it. But it's the word actually causes a reaction inside of me. And I'm like, it's like the word psychic used to. Like the word psychic used to give me the biggest allergic reaction.
Yeah.
And now I'm so much more mellow about it. And yeah, it's a beautiful thing. But yeah, I've come to that very recently, and it seems to fit well with what it is that I do and where I'm going as well in life.
Nice. Yeah, I like the word teacher. I describe myself as a teacher. I don't have any like negative reaction to that word. I remember though, like the word psychic. I remember, and I still don't really describe myself as being psychic because I don't really think of myself as psychic. I kind of just say that I'm intuitive because that feels like less threatening.
Softer word. Yeah, it's a softer word. I know what you mean.
There's something about the word psychic where I feel like if I describe myself as psychic, I feel like I've got to prove myself and I've got to like do something really magical and like pow pow, whereas like intuitive, I can just kind of be myself.
I know just what you mean. And it's really like the word psychic for me, I would never call myself psychic, but people call me psychic just because of my ability to read other people. Like I have this understanding of other people. And it's a funny thing because over time, over the years, I've said things about people and definitive statements before I've even known that person. And those statements have come to pass later on, giving me this incredible track record of just being able to, as they say in Australia, she can pick it. Like, so I'm like, I can pick it. Like, that's what it is. And over time, that's like, oh, you're freaky with that. Like, you're freaky with that. And I'm like, I think it's more about perception rather than psychic ability. But then when you put that out there, people are like, no, I'm pretty perceptive. That's something else. And I was like, oh, well. Yeah.
Right. So as someone who is, immersed in this world of spirituality and tarot and esoteric things, do you ever just get sick of it? Like, I remember there was a time, when I first discovered self-help and when I first discovered spirituality, I just like read all the books on, and I kind of came to both of those things at the same time. I got into kind of new agey things. And so I was reading all these books on angels and crystals and Reiki and tarot and meditation. And after about maybe 3 years of that, I just reached a point where I was like, I felt like I was going to vomit if I saw another book about crystal healing or something like that. Like I just overdosed on new age stuff. And I was just like, blah, like, I don't want to do any of this stuff for a while. And I just kind of like reached that point, and I got over it. I kind of took a break from it. And then I got back into stuff in like a less intense way. But I was just wondering, like, because you have always been kind of around spirituality and stuff like that. Do you ever just like get sick of it and need a break from it? Or is that a crazy idea?
Oh, sometimes it's less about taking a break from it all and more about taking a break from the trends, if that makes sense. So there's lots of trends in spirituality and new ageism and the wonderful world of paganism and esoteric material. There's always a trend.
Yeah.
And it's the trends that wear me down, that really grind me down. But everyday like spirituality, like really mellow. My practice is actually very mellow. I think people have an idea that I'm highly ritualistic and I've got like massive circles on my property. I actually do have a circle on my property, but that's a totally different thing. It's like, I think spirituality is about everyday living with purpose in a manner that nurtures and nourishes you and that keeps you active and excited and creative. And I would never want to take a step back from that, because I think the aspect of spirituality that I most tap into really feeds my creativity. And I think I would wither away and die if I wasn't creating something, if I wasn't imagining something, if I wasn't stimulating myself in that way. But yeah, trends, absolutely. I'm like, I'm bored to death with trends. They come and I'm like, oh, that's exciting for the first 30 seconds. And then I'm like, oh my God, I can't hear any more about this.
Yeah. What are some of your least favorite trends, or trends that you're just like not super into, or maybe were into at one point, but you're not anymore?
Oh my gosh. All right. Let me see. Well, right now, I think one of the trends that I'm trying to really like step back from are, and you could probably appreciate this as well, it's like I only recently got into tarot picker cards, and I've only done a couple. I do them a little bit more on my Patreon. But it's the questions that are associated with those tarot picker cards that I find, like outside of my own personal practice, that I find really disconcerting. And it's all about love and soulmate and twin flames, and you know, these ideas, these concepts, there's nothing wrong with them individually. It's how they're portrayed, how they're perpetuated. And especially the twin flame, like somebody says twin flames to me and my eyelids start to flutter a little bit, and I get like, just like I have a visceral reaction to it. But twin flames, again, on its own, very interesting concept. But there are times where I think the new age spiritual, call it what you will, community, they latch onto an idea, and it's very quick for that misinformation to envelop the same subject. And then I think that's the issue that I personally have. But yeah, right now it's all the love-centered, will they come back? Is he my soulmate? That kind of thing on its own, with one-on-one with a client. If a client came to me with that, I would address it reasonably and authentically, but it's like the fad topic at the moment amongst tarot. I've noticed anyway.
I have not been watching any videos on tarot or doing anything tarot related apart from just creating my own content. So I'm like completely like uncool and not up with the trends right now.
Well, I'm not a tarot watcher. I'm a tarot creator. It's just something that when I was starting to do tarot picker cards, I did a little research for myself. I'm like, so how are they done? How do people respond to it? Is this a good idea? Because people were asking me, can you do tarot picker cards? And I was like, I don't know about that. And that was because in the back of my mind, I was like, I don't even know what that is. So I went about and I did my research. I'm like, this is actually really good. And things that I already do on an individual tarot reading, like I use so many decks in one client reading. And so that, you know, the way that they layer their cards in little piles and then put crystals on them, like that seemed all very familiar to me. But instead of it being one single reading, it's, you know, several piles, sometimes 2, sometimes 4, sometimes 7, and each one red. And there's always a theme attached to it. I'm like, this could be really interesting because it's a nice way of doing, you know, tarot readings for the public in a way that's just that little bit more personalized. So rather than pulling just cards from a deck for one single reading, you're doing that so many different times, and people can then choose which pile they want to take from and then accept the message that comes from that pile, which I think is, in essence, it's very nice. But yeah, it's worth a Google, let me tell you, Kate.
Okay, I'm gonna look into it. Someone did ask me not too long ago about something to do with twin flames, what I thought about it or something like that. And I'm like, I don't even know what that means. Like, I'm guessing it's like soulmates, like the same thing, but maybe a little bit different.
No, it's so much more exhaustive than that. Soulmates are just you know, another piece of your soul. So together you may incarnate in the same lifetime, and then, you know, you have your soul's other half or a piece of your soul, and so you're terribly drawn to these people. Twin flames, you're drawn to these people, yes, but they help you to process trauma. Like they're there to like bring shit up and to make you like evolve in some way. So it's hard experiences with a twin flame. And so whenever I hear someone say, I really want to meet my twin flame, and I'm like, so that you can be in pain for the rest of your life.
It sounds like a way to like kind of defend like really dysfunctional relationships. Right?
That's it. Like, and that's how you hear it. I'm like, oh, we're just having the worst time because he's my twin flame. And I'm like, no, probably because she is not right for you. She was meant to be out of your life a while ago. And it's not up to me to judge that, but you can almost see it as, I guess this answers the question even better. It's that these concepts are used as more of a crutch to explain away, problems. And it's not very healthy. It's not a very healthy process to do that. So, yeah.
I would say one trend that I just don't have the stomach for anymore is like, I don't know if you remember, but back around 2012, like leading up to 2012, there was so much in the new age community. There's a lot of like hoopla about what 2012 was going to be, and that we were going to be, I can't remember what it was. We were going to be moving into a different frequency or some crap like that, and like everything was going to be like better, and people were going to be more enlightened and blah 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 blah. And I mean, I think we know that's bullshit now, right? Now that we're like, I don't think that happened.
Right. Yes, the perpetual age of Aquarius, like that's like it just keeps coming. And astrologers are like, no, this is not, the age of Aquarius is yet to come. Right. But there was already this like, we're elevating, we're evolving. It was almost like the promise of Christ coming back and like saving everyone. Like it was that kind of intensity, that kind of certainty. And I don't know if anyone noticed 2010, but that was not a good year for anybody.
Really? What happened in 2010?
Oh, it was like a round out of things that happened. And then 10 years later, 2020, was that a good year for anybody?
Yeah, no. I don't even remember 2010. I remember 2009 because I did a lot of stuff. I think 2010 I might have like lost my job. Yeah, I think there was like some shit happening in 2010.
I remember 2010 significantly because my eldest daughter was born, and in that year, and I noticed so much of what was going on in the world because I was pregnant and I had all this time, and I was living on an island at the top end of Australia. So I was like, I had a lot of time to reflect. So I noticed a few things. I really did, like people shifting out of one skin and into another, people changing careers, and just, incredible things happening. But for some, that was really hard. And I remember a lot of relationships ending at that time, and I was really shocked. It's funny how when other people's relationships end, you find yourself very invested in that suddenly. And you're like, oh my God, I can't believe that. Yeah. So that was definitely a reflective thing, and I've kept that in the back of my mind. But again, in cycles of 2020 was not a good year for many people at all.
Yeah, I know a lot of people whose relationships disintegrated in 2020, like a lot of people.
Yep. And that was it really was a time, like you could feel it. It was a time to shed skins, I found. And some people, approach that task really efficiently and very grounded, and other people were hysterical. We saw the hysterical ones on YouTube.
Yeah, totally. So where can people find you if they want to learn more about you?
Well, you could go to my website. You could go to my YouTube channel. You could go to any one of my social media accounts, my Patreon. Any one of those places will sort of lead you down the path to me. And that's pretty much it.
Okay, nice. I'll put all your links below, including the link to your Tarot Summer School course. And I just want to say thank you so much, Avalon, for talking with me. It's been wonderful to get to know you better, and I'm really enjoyed this conversation.
Same. It's been fun. Thank you so much for having me, and it's given me an opportunity to have a little chat with you as well. It's funny, we see people online and then we're like, one day we talk to that person and it's like something totally different, isn't it?
Yeah, I know. It totally is. Yeah, I've actually been really enjoying like chatting with, because I've been talking to all the Tarot Summer School teachers this year, doing interviews. I have one more interview left to do. And
Nice.
yeah, it's been great, like just getting to know everyone better and just kind of hanging out and chit-chatting.
Yeah, it's been so fun. It's such a great idea that you've had as well. It gives people the opportunity to to meet and greet all these other different tarot people,
Yeah.
because yeah, it's a different thing, isn't it? It's really
Yeah.
different.
Yeah. I just love how like everyone has different experience and like has come to doing this work in a different way. And
Mm.
everyone has like a different energy, different personality, different area of expertise. And so it's just so fascinating, getting to know everyone and getting to sample their course offerings as well has been really special.
Oh, yeah, it's fun. They've done some beautiful stuff over there. So it's really exciting from the teacher perspective, just to be able to like peep in and
Yes.
like taste everyone's, like be a super taster. I'm like, oh my gosh, it's
Totally.
so fun.
Well, thank you so much for chatting with me, Avalon.
My pleasure.